And we are officially live. So today on Lifestyle Medicine, we have Tristan Montoya. Tristan, you and I were just talking, having our little pre-podcast call, and you've got some interesting titles, man. Would you mind kind of going through those and telling the audience what you do in a nutshell? And then from there we can kind of jump into the deeper good stuff that you do.
Definitely. First of all, I don't even like titles. If I could just say I'm Tristan, I'm this guy that just will say some cool stuff and listen to you and we can have some breakthroughs, then that would be great. And if I could run my business like that, I would. But unfortunately, people need to know who you are, what you do, what you've studied, who you've trained under, what certifications you have. Now, I like to loosely call myself a transformational artist. For me, I did get formal training as a coach. So I'm a certified integrative coach. I did that through the Ford Institute. Mm-hmm. The well-known Debbie Ford created an institute before she passed.
Yep.
Very professional program. It took me over a year. It was harder than college. Like it was actually,
really?
Yeah, 1 year.
She did the shadow work, right? That was
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. She studied under Deepak Chopra. So Deepak Chopra was her mentor.
Oh, cool.
And then she went on to author 9, if not 10 books before she passed. Mm-hmm. And she left behind the Ford Institute, and it's still being run by her protege. So I got this training, and then I went out into the world to become a coach. And I realized that although they had promised I would not recognize myself when I got through this training, I was definitely a different person, but I still didn't have let me put it this way, I didn't feel confident enough to really create my practice. And so that lack of confidence, the fact that my nerves were still bothering me, I still had some anxiety issues, I still had some emotional stuff going on, and I couldn't quite break through that emotional heaviness, those blocks, and that anxiety, which I knew was coming from beliefs. And so I, enter EFT. Yeah. Right. So I get trained in EFT, and I learn all about subconscious beliefs, and I tapping, and the meridians and all this. And so I could call myself an EFT practitioner. I could call myself an integrative coach. I could call myself a spiritual teacher. I like artist because ultimately, before any of the coaching, I was just writing. I was just at home, inspired by this awakening that was happening to me, and I just wanted to talk about it, and I just wanted to write about it, and I wanted to connect to others who were experiencing this, and so I started a blog, and I started getting blogs out there, and people started to enjoy the writing. So I thought, well, this is fun, and they say if you find something you love, you'll never work another day in your life. And so as I was writing, I thought, this is amazing. Like, I love doing this. I could do this every day. Apparently, it's not work. And so,
right.
First my mission was to find a way to get paid to do that. Ultimately, I wanted to help people on a more personal level. So I did become a trained coach, and I did start a life coaching practice. And I have been doing that for the past several years. We could kind of get into how that's kind of gone up and down, and how I've ended up, where I am now. But that's the whole metamorphosis that I chose. I chose to go through this real interesting unfoldment, as I call it. Like, my life path has definitely not been linear, and I like that, but it's unsettling for the kind of person who thinks life is linear and it doesn't expect those big rises and big falls. I've been riding the wave for a long time, and I'm here to say that it's I noticed that one of your guests, Iska, said it's not for the faint of heart. What I would say, it's not for the weak of mind.
Yeah, for sure.
I wrote a book called The 8 Secrets of the Heart, and I like to say that, the heart, it isn't wounded. It's perfectly intact. It's strong. It's just waiting for us to connect to it. So it's not that the heart is faint or weak. Those adjectives don't really apply. It's that the mind can be lazy and weak if we don't train it. And so if you meet up, I'll speak in first person because this was my experience. If I meet up with resistance and I realize that the life that I want to live has a higher vibration, meaning it takes more effort to work myself into that way of being, then I realize that, I've got work to do. I've got some mindset shifting to do. I've got some discipline to work on. I've got some habit changing to do.
Yep.
I got to really look at what I believe, and I got to look at how I'm creating my environment inside and out, and just be really honest with myself.
Mm-hmm. Man, I couldn't agree more. And I liked the phrase that you used. You said, was it unfolding? Was that the
unfoldment?
Unfoldment. Yeah, I used the word unraveling in my process quite a bit.
I like that one too.
Yeah,
I like that one too.
Yeah, unraveling. Because it has fast and slow rhythms.
It does. And I was using unraveling for a little while, but I also realized that could signify to some people that they're falling apart. And I didn't want to. I'm very careful with my verbiage because
language.
As a writer and as a transformational artist, I really want to pick the right word that will really hit home.
Yep.
And if I say unraveling, then a person can just imagine themselves like falling apart at the seams and like, and like all their power just dripping away from them.
Yeah.
And I don't want to insinuate that if you begin this path, all your power just drips and bleeds away from you.
For sure.
But unraveling sometimes is what happens, because if you're this big wound up, you've seen when they put the rubber bands together and it forms a big tight core.
Yep.
Yeah, and just imagine all those rubber bands start popping off and popping.
Yep,
off.
totally.
Yeah, all of a sudden we become unraveled. But at the middle of that, we hope that there's this strong core holding it all together. So I like unraveling because it's true. There's actually truth in that we do unravel and we do release layers. And I communicate. I'm very honest about that.
Yeah, man. I know. I've noticed that about you in the discourses that we've had. And yeah, man, truth be told, most of my life is unraveling. There's a chaotic flow to my life, and it's always been like that. And I used to think I used to kind of have a negative association with it, but it's just sort of the way, like my life current rolls. And yeah, man, pros and cons to it, but overall it's like, yeah, that's honest. It's like it definitely unravels more than there's a certain amount of chaos that my rhythm just gravitates towards, but it's being tempered over as I get older. It's less chaotic than it used to be, and there's just things that I'm picking up along the way that have helped me. But yeah, man, I've liked just the stuff that you've talked about and the way you've approached your clientele, your kind of larger mission, the things that you've spoken about. I was wondering, because it's relatively fresh, your time in Guatemala. You were there. How long were you actually there for?
A year and 2 months.
Wow. So you lived there. That's a full-time, like actually living there.
Yeah.
And, you can dive into some of the things that, like the big gems that you gleaned from that process. But I would like to touch on, you and I initially connected when I had made a kind of a solo podcast talking about the therapeutic effects of psilocybin mushrooms. And I would love to hear some of your process with that in the Guatemala scene, and then whatever else that, since it's fresh. I mean, I know you were there, and it just seemed like as you were posting things and I was watching you, a lot was transpiring there. It seemed like there was a lot of growth and evolution. So I would love to hear some of those highlights if you don't mind. Yeah,
definitely. Can I challenge you before we do that?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. I just want to challenge something you said, that your life breeds chaos or something like that. And because it touches on something that I may or may not talk about, and that is that our inner state creates our outer state.
Sure.
Your inner reality is basically reflected back to you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. In my experience, I'll just speak for me. I don't mean to call you out. I just noticed that.
No, call away, man. So I don't care.
Yeah. And it's because look, my only wisdom comes from personal experience. And what I realized was that I had to choose peace. Because there was many times in my life when I wasn't choosing peace. I was actually choosing turmoil through my thoughts, through my behavior, through my attitude, my actions, and it was showing up in my life. And I'd say, well, where's all this stuff coming from? I'm peaceful. I'm spiritual. I'm harmonious.
I'm deep, bro. I'm deep, right?
Yeah. And then I actually had to look within, and I had these inner conversations going on that were like, I had passive aggression going on almost all the time within me. And so that reflected in my conversations, and I was the angry spiritual teacher. I kid you not.
Yeah.
And and I want to be really authentic, because that's what came up for me in Guatemala, to be completely honest. My big authenticity lesson came through psilocybin, and I'll tell you about that in a second.
Yeah.
But I became an angry spiritual teacher. Why? Because it's not that I was angry at the people that showed up in my life. I was angry within myself. I was angry that I still had grief to process. I still had deep upsets that in my life that I hadn't processed. And here I was trying to talk about peace, love, and harmony from an intellectual place, from a heady place. And I hadn't taken that. I knew it intellectually, and I understood them as concepts. And I really felt on some level that I was enjoying peace and harmony, but I was not.
Yeah.
And what psilocybin showed me, the reason I believe that psilocybin came into my life, because I've been working with psilocybin on a certain level for many years. It's definitely been my plant medicine of choice. And
mine too. Yeah.
I really enjoy how it works with me emotionally. It's been, I used cannabis only a little bit while I lived in LA. Just a very, very, very seldom would I actually go to cannabis. Usually just one toke of a really nice medicinal marijuana, and it put me in an altered state so that I could bypass the rational mind and go into a deeper, more profound meditation. So what I found was that if I used psilocybin in very small doses, I could actually create a very profound spiritual experience as well, and I could tap into higher realms. I could communicate with my spirit guides. I could feel the Christ consciousness. There were a lot of things happening, right? If I did it in small doses. But here's what happened. I'm down in Guatemala, and I had a number of experiences that transpired. Basically, what took me to Guatemala was I became the resident coach for a circus group, a modern day, they call themselves the New Age Circus. So it was a modern day training ground for these circus artists, performers, think fire dancers, hula hoopers,
I see. Okay.
So modern day, they're kind of the types of people you see at festivals. They train, some of them dance on stage, some of them do fire spinning. So here I am living with this circus community, and I started down in Nicaragua, living on Lake Nicaragua on a little tiny island. And then that went well, and I was coaching, and I was offering workshops, I was doing breath work, I was teaching emotional intelligence, and that went really well. And they said, why don't we take you up to Guatemala? We've got a residency up there. And I said, great.
Yeah, cool.
So I ended up in this hillside retreat center looking over the lake with these majestic views, and I was doing it all over again. I was coaching people, and I was running workshops, breath work, and it was profound.
Living the dream, man. Living the dream.
I mean, not everybody's dream, but
yours, yeah. I mean,
but it was my dream.
Yeah.
And for a short time, I was like, life's pretty awesome. And then life wasn't so awesome, because I think what happened was this was the first time that I lived in close quarters with a lot of people. By nature, I am a very solitary person. I interact with community when I want to. and when I don't, I like my space. And here I was living with 30 plus people in a closed container and a lot of personalities to deal with. And I'm working with a lot of them one-on-one. I'm getting to know their personal issues. And it was a lot for me. It was a lot for me to take on then.
Yeah.
So I became emotionally and psychologically imbalanced. And it turned, I ended up, I was thinking about this. I was out on my walk thinking about our talk, and this phrase came up in there was a resident psychologist. He showed up from Canada, and finally there was someone in the community that could act as a colleague for me. And so we could trade sessions. We could come. So I needed someone. I was
help me out, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, help me out.
I was helping all these people on a psycho-spiritual level, and then one day I was like, I need help. Shit, I'm hurting here. I'm taking on everyone's stuff, and I can't deal with it anymore. Yeah. And I remember him asking me a few questions about, like, well, what's going on? And I told him that a lot of these things that were going on inside of my sessions were really frustrating me and draining my energy. And he said, okay. He goes, I'll tell you something my colleague told me. So now this is passed down wisdom. So now I'm going to pass it down even more to anyone who's listening. He said, you never want to work harder than your clients. And And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, if you're sitting in front of them working harder than they're working on going with, you're using all your tools and all your insights and trying to dig into them, but they're not allowing you to do that. So you have to sit back and just wait and ask maybe a question like, what's underneath this resistance? I thought you hired me. I thought you wanted help. Is that still the case? And I was like, wow.
Revolutionary. Yeah.
This blew my mind. So all of a sudden I pull back. This was the shift. This is a big shift for me, and I'll lead into how it connects to psilocybin.
Yeah.
Because what happened was because I started. So here's where I started using the word unraveling. Mm-hmm. So at this point in my life, I started to think, wow, I'm unraveling. I thought I had it all together. I had the certifications. I've been helping others in a way that I thought was powerful. But now I'm unraveling, and I'm going to a psychologist, and like he's helping me, and I'm coming undone, because I've been helping 20, 30 some people, plus running a private coaching practice, and now I need help. And anyway, long story short, I leave the community and I go down into town, and sooner, in a fairly short amount of time, I found this cute little house with a nice garden. Two levels. I installed internet and I started working from home. So I'm running my private practice and I'm running workshops down in town, and I've got a pretty good little business set up. People find me breath work, and then I go. I do private sessions at my house, coaching, counseling, breath work, and around this time, I started recognizing that now that I have this space all to myself, how would I like to use this space? And then I created this beautiful temple. My house was like a temple full of just beautiful things, candles, flower arrangements, and I really made it, incense, music. I really set the tone. Part of me seeking peace was first creating my inner environment, my home environment, and not to mean my inner environment. First, my home environment that needed to be peaceful. And then I started taking small doses of psilocybin because mushrooms down where I was living in Guatemala, it was a common medicine to have around. Mm-hmm. It was widely available. It was quality, and it was stable, meaning that I knew how much I was getting. I knew where it came from. I knew who grew it. I knew the effects it would have on me. Mm-hmm. Some different strands have different. So I knew what I was taking.
Right.
And I could measure it to the amounts that I was comfortable with.
Right.
So what starts happening is I start having these beautiful spiritual ceremonies alone in my house, and I'm thinking, this is great. I'm connecting to my higher self, and this is safe for me.
Yep.
And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying this level, and I felt like I didn't need to be risky because my mind didn't feel well, and I thought if I take high doses, I'm not sure what'll happen. And I don't want to take the risk that I could literally unravel to the point that I can't put myself back together. I didn't have that level of support in this. I mean, I knew a lot of people, and a lot of people were practitioners, but I didn't want to burden anyone by saying, shit's hit the fan, I need help now. So I didn't ask for any big ceremonies. I didn't go looking for any big ceremonies. I just did my personal practice at home with small amounts, usually a gram or less. And for me, that was enough.
Yeah.
And then this man comes into my life. It's very interesting. I know how that sounds, but this big burly Italian guy finds me on the dance floor when we're up at an ecstatic dance at a different retreat center that was also up in the, but a little bit higher back.
Yeah.
And this guy, this charming Italian guy, I have a lot of affection for him. It was not a romantic thing. What I'm suggesting is that this was a soul brother. Yeah. He came into my life. He kind of like sashayed over to me one day. I was stretching for ecstatic dance, and he's like, "I know you, brother." And I said, "Have we met before in town? I'm not sure where we know each other from." And he's like, "No, I recognize you." And I said, okay, this was mysterious, but he ended up just spirit guided him over to me, and he recognized me as a soul brother. We began talking about psilocybin that day, And we sat down on the ledge after the dance was over. We sat down on the ledge with lake views, and we got into this really deep conversation about the power of psilocybin and what we envision for using psilocybin as a tool to help unlock other, consciousness for those who are still kind of locked inside of themselves. I call it, I got a couple of different analogies for this. One is like prisoner of pain, like they're a prisoner of their own pain. Another analogy I like is the sea of suffering. They're just wallowing about in the sea of suffering, really not knowing how to get out of their pain, out of their suffering. So he felt that we should have a ceremony very soon. And my inner, something was stirring up inside of me, and I was like, this is right and this is true. And I was so excited. I said, how about tonight? I got this cool place, and I'm gonna deck it all out. I got a fire pit I just built. Don't worry, I'll set up everything. You come down to my place at this time, and I'll have everything ready to go, and we'll create a proper ceremony. So this was my deep dive, and I felt safe because this was an experienced practitioner of the plant medicine. This was another physical being in front of me who could help me should something go wrong, and I felt supported.
Yep.
So we took a larger dose than I've ever taken. It was very high grade, and we really called in the sacred aspect of it. This medicine had been blessed by the person who offered it. We really called in our guides and angels and really called in intention. So this was an intentional ceremony. And when we went into it, we knew we were going to go we were going to do a full ceremony that went all through the night into the morning. And I had a feeling that something big was going to happen, but I wasn't sure what. And usually when I was taking those small amounts, what would happen was I'd come alive, I'd be more expressive, I'd be more artistic, I'd dance and flow with just more ease and grace. And that's kind of what happened to me at first, until he brought me into this experience of kind of like, do you see how you're showing up? And I'm like, I'm just having fun. Like, the medicine's in me, it's working with me. He's like, no. Like, you're just out there. And this isn't growth. This is just play. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, here I am, like, under the influence of this medicine. I feel like it's guiding me, it's working with me. And all of a sudden, I'm brought into this kind of higher vibrational frequency that we'll call authenticity. For the sake of this conversation, we'll call this vibration authenticity. Because as we said before we got on this call, authenticity is a concept. And all I understood was that I was being brought into a higher vibration, and that real growth could happen in this vibration. And what I realized was, because I had an awareness of the growth that was available to me, I also had an awareness of the space that I was existing in. And it was kind of airy fairy, light and wavy. It was bendable, and and it was workable, and I was having fun in that light energy. But there was something was drawing me into my core. I call it now, my tagline on my website is, your true nature is always calling you home.
I like that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So what was happening in my experience, from what I can discern after sitting with this for a long time, because it's taken me months, literally, to process what happened that one night. My true nature was calling me home, and it was, it wasn't in a stubborn way, it wasn't in an abusive way, it was just in a very firm way. It was kind of sitting there and just very patiently, are you ready? Are you ready now? Like, oh, do you want to play some more? Then go play. Are you ready? And so it just waited for me to say yes. And finally I was like, I thought I was showing up. I thought I was being my full self. I was coaching others. I was guiding people. I was making a living. I was doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And I'm having fun doing it. What's wrong with this life? Why would I change it? It seems to be working. So we're not talking, great, like I'm 40 years old. We're not talking, this wasn't my first go around, what do they say?
First rodeo.
first rodeo.
Not your first rodeo, right?
Yeah. Like I'd been around the block. I had a spiritual awakening in my 20s. I thought I had reached a point in my life where I was pretty well grounded into this whole idea of myself as a spiritual being, working in the field of his choice, serving on a higher level and supporting others to do the same. Why? And I asked myself this many times. Why, Spirit? Why did you humble me this? Why did you break me down?
Yeah.
To the point that I was almost like, I don't want to say dysfunctional, but I was not functional. I wasn't functional in my own life, and things started to fall apart. I started to, you could call it unraveling. I could even say I was imploding. I was imploding into, like I was falling into myself, going deeper into my core. But meanwhile, my psyche just started kind of falling apart.
And can I ask a quick question here?
Yeah.
So was this all of this happening during the medicine ceremony, or was this the, what, I don't know what you would call like the aftermath or end result of going through this ceremony, or was this unraveling happening while you were in the ceremony with your friend?
Yeah. Well, one of the big shifts that happened inside of the ceremony is what I've understood is called a psychotic break. Mm-hmm. This is lingo,
sure.
And psychologists use this too. They're careful to watch if a psychotic break occurs in a session. Mm-hmm. So another practitioner of plant medicines who runs a center down there, I did another powerful session before I left the lake with him. He's very experienced, over 200 ceremonies that he's personally been involved in.
Yeah.
He studied under shamans and tatas in South and Central America. So in any case, he revealed to me the terminology of a psychotic break, and this is what I understand happened in my first big ceremony. Mm. While I was in that light, playful energy, just enjoying myself, thinking I was, the medicine's acting on me. I'm doing what that's what I'm supposed to be doing, enjoying myself, enjoying the experience. But what happened when he called, when this person who was with me, when he called me into awareness of the higher vibration, all of a sudden I had a psychotic break. Because all of a sudden the person I was pretending to be wasn't in alignment with the person that I knew I was.
Yeah.
And this was very unsettling.
Yeah.
And I mean, so it was so unsettling that I basically just flung myself to the floor, went into fetal position, and started heaving and sobbing. And this was really hard for me because I had some real personal family stuff that came up at that point. Mm-hmm. Now, the issue that we all have to look at is how much of this is my identity and how much of this is like core wounding. Is my identity wounded, or is it this is like core spiritual, like soul material? And right. I had to just give myself the space and the compassion. Luckily, I had a brother there that literally just put his hands on me and said, "I love you. You're okay." Like I just met this guy, but he gave me that brotherly love and just said, "I love you, brother. You're fine the way you are." Like I needed to hear something, just anything. At one point I was so in my process, he goes, I should go. And I said, no, don't go. Like,
please don't go, bro.
I'm very vulnerable right now, but please don't go, because I needed that kind of support. And I believe we all do, to really unfold, to really open up safely. I think it may help a person to have that support of another human being who's spiritually connected, who's connected to their heart, guiding them through that process, or assisting them, or just witnessing them as they go through. There's something about that was very safe.
Yeah.
Felt very supportive and very nourishing.
It's really good, man, like that you had someone there to support you in a space like that. Because I think when those doors open up, especially in the context of ceremony, it is vulnerable. I mean, it's, as a culture, I don't feel like there's a lot of living medicine traditions in the West. And so as we're kind of finding our way back into these modalities and these methods, when there's support, it helps. Even if it's not perfect, I feel like, even if someone isn't, I've had support in those moments where I've had some pretty rough patches. And even when the support wasn't perfect, they weren't trained. It was just the presence of someone there saying it's okay. I'm here for you. And that's, God, in ceremony and out of ceremony, that's important. That's a thread we all need. So I second that fully.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's symbolic in a way, because basically the child inside of us needs nurturing, and eventually the child inside of us is going to surrender to the adult within us. And until we learn how to give ourselves that kind of compassion and care, we almost need another human being to enact that, so that we can feel taken care of, so that we can say, wow, that act of compassion was so nourishing. Why don't I give myself that same nourishment? And then we realize everything I think I need on the outside, I can give to myself first.
Yeah.
The crying that I was doing on the floor, to be really open and honest, was like, I didn't feel like I had the love of my own brothers. I have some ongoing disputes, I guess you could say, with my brothers that we cannot seem to resolve, or they're not willing to resolve. And that really hurt me. It hurt. I mean, it hurt my identity. Now that I've sat with it for a couple months, it doesn't hurt me anymore, because I see that I was in a story. The story I was telling myself was, I'm not loved or lovable. And it had to, in this case, it had to do with blood relation. And that story, I believe, carried into my life in other ways. And I was just, so I was shown very clearly that I was playing roles in this world. One of them was the poor me, the I'm not lovable. One of them that was most shocking was I was in my spiritual ego. I was in the role of life coach, spiritual coach. Yeah. I'm your guide. Come talk to me. I got the training. I got the experience. What do you need?
Right.
And I was look, I'm very good at what I do, and I have a sense of presence with every person that I do work with, and they've all had great results. And I couldn't understand why I was being humbled at this time if what I'm doing is effective.
Right.
And that was really unsettling for me, because it affected me financially. I mean, literally, I believe it. All of a sudden, I didn't feel confident doing my work anymore, because I was like, wait, I thought I was showing up as a true
right.
coach, teacher, guide. Yeah. What am I? And what am I leading people into?
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I mean, that's a pretty legitimate place to be. I think when these doors open and they get cracked and we crack and there's this, the vase shatters for a minute, I think it's very reasonable to get into these positions of, what the hell am I doing? And how viable, and am I full of shit? I mean, that's a question that just comes up. Am I just completely full of shit, or am I actually not full of shit? I'm just human and have, an unending cycle of renewal and breakdown and renewal that seems to kind of come up. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, would you say that after or during, I mean, I think you're probably still in it, but would you say that you were bettered by this process?
Bettered. I like that. Was I bettered? Yes, because, I was humbled. Yeah. Okay. And because I'm more humble, of course I was bettered. Yeah. Because the last thing anybody wants is an arrogant spiritual teacher.
Yeah. Amen.
I don't want an arrogant spiritual teacher.
Same. Yeah.
I don't. And I wasn't aware of my arrogance. I wasn't even aware of it.
Boy, that's the curveball, right? When we just don't see it.
But it's funny, because I'm thinking of this one client that I had down in Guatemala when I lived in this particular house, and he was working on his deep, deep arrogance. He had come from an upper class family. In Guatemala, there's a huge disparity between rich and poor. So he came from the upper class, and he lived in our community. But he was a spiritual man in our community, but he came from the elite. And, one of the things we worked on with him was his arrogance. And he's like, oh, I know I'm arrogant. I was like, right. So here I had this direct reflection in front of me. But at the time, I didn't see it as a reflection on me. I didn't think it was like, I figured, at that point, I was just showing up to serve my client. But, I mean, after all is said and done, yes, I got the humility lesson of a lifetime. It's humbled the fuck out of me. Excuse my language, but
no, you can curse. You can curse on the podcast. It's
good,
okay.
That's where fuck is necessary.
Yeah.
Like, it humbled the fuck out of me. Emphatically, I want to use that word because I needed it. It's not like I needed the universe to kick me in the ass. I mean, I think that's a very like uncompassionate thing to say.
Yeah.
But I truly desired to be a more harmonious person, and to do that I needed more humility. To be that, I needed more humility.
Yep.
And so I'm glad I have the humility now, because I'm able to show up in a different way. And I want to just add one thing, unless you have a
no, add it, and then I'll add my piece when you're done. Yeah.
So here's where it brought me back to. I got this. My life has been led by a series of books. Have been one of my best teachers. Okay, I've hired a lot of mentors. I've gone through a lot of trainings, but books have been my best teachers, and they found me. They literally find me. I don't even have to, sometimes I'll physically go to the library, but that book, it calls me in. Yeah. Debbie Ford, the reason I got my Ford training was because the book was literally put into my hands. Here, you might like this.
Yeah.
And I was like, and that ended up being who I got my coaching training with. The book that I knew I had to get when I got back to the States was Nonviolent Communication. Through it, I'd never seen the book. I'd never read the book. I'd never heard the name of the author. I just knew that this thing existed called nonviolent communication, and that sometimes people practice it and call it compassionate communication. And one of the questions that you ask inside of compassionate communication is, what are you needing? Mm-hmm. And this helps break ground. This helps make connection. If I'm talking to you, and if you're a client or a friend, it doesn't matter. My attention, my presence, when I come into presence, and I'm acknowledging, and I'm evolved enough, I'm self-evolved enough to know my own needs, then I'm taken care of. And when I'm taken care of, I open up capacity inside of me. And when I have capacity inside of me, then I can put my attention on you and fully be there. Now, the first and foremost thing in this space is, what are you needing? And I really want to know.
Yeah.
So knowing our needs, first of all, knowing my needs, what my personal needs are, and meeting those needs is an act of self-love. And so I take care of myself first. Yeah. And then what I've understood and where this humility has led me is to really explore what people are needing, because that's how I'm going to show up in the world. That's my next phase of service to the world had to come through this path, because now I'm cued in, I'm tuned in to needs, and I really want to know what people need, and then I want to help them meet those needs in whatever solution that may arise in.
Mm-hmm. I like that, and there's so many threads that I could jump in on what you've said. I mean, you've got some really key points that I think are wonderful and important for people to hear. The thing that I was going to add to yours and to interject is, you and I have talked about superhero themes and mythology just in prior conversations, and as you were talking about your psychotic break and this thing that was happening, it was like the split, right? Like there's this character dancing out here, and then it's like, oh God, there's this whole other bandwidth that I could come into attunement with, and when that happens, there's a split of some kind, and it made me think about the Superman 3 movie. Do you remember that one where Superman? It's the one with
Christopher Reeves Superman.
Christopher Reeves, yeah, and he in the third one, it's got Richard Pryor in it, and I think it was whoever the bad guy in the movie is. It's not Richard Pryor. They try to replicate kryptonite, but there's a missing 0.57%, like this, off-planet ingredient. They don't know what it is, so they put tar into it, right? And they end up gifting this rock, this kryptonite rock, to Superman, and nothing happens. He doesn't keel over. He still has his powers, and they're like, what the fuck, this is no good. And when you were talking about this, it made me think about that, because in the story, right, it's the effects are delayed. It doesn't make him weak, but it makes his suit gets dark, and he gets really violent, and he gets really angry. And then in this junkyard scene at the end, he has this split. There's like a light that comes out of his third eye, which is kind of cool. And then the character splits, and he ends up battling, the dark Superman. And one of the alternative theories about this was they said it wasn't, the kryptonite didn't poison him, it allowed him to feel. And that was like the alternative, deeper message there, was that he was allowed to feel all of these things about being an orphan, being shot to a planet by himself, and he actually got to feel the rage of being alone, truly alone in his own experience. And I always liked that because I think that's what, at least part of it, right? I don't think it's everything, but I feel like part of what these medicines can kind of do is allow us to feel into those new possibilities, those new like you said, the new alignment, or one that's just unfamiliar, maybe one you haven't touched in a while, or it's been foreign for a period of time, for a portion of your life. But as you were saying that, it just made me think about that, because it's not that that part of you that was dancing and in flow was bad. It's just feeling something different, but it does create a rift, right, between those two. It's almost like they can't hold space at the same time, or you have to be able to interchange that persona or character, to come into a period where those things align well. So it just made me think about that, man. Like that's, in the movie, Superman ends up choking out the bad one, right? And he's back and he's happier and stronger, and everything's wonderful. But it just made me really think about, man, how those experiences, and I'm really happy that you shared it, because you're not alone. I mean, I've heard so many other people who have gone through some variation of this, where they have a split or a rift in how they're presenting themselves in the world, and then they're shown either a new way or a different way, and it's often terrifying because it's new and unknown, and there's just a whole bandwidth of experience that people are freaked out by. It's happened to me in a different context within psilocybin ceremonies, where shown something new, and I thought, I'm not really sure how to show up to this, so I'm gonna cry, and I'm gonna allow myself to feel those things and to unwind. And it was good and it was wonderful, but it was very difficult in the moment. And it sounds like yours was as well. That was a pretty rough journey.
Well, it was. I'm going to tell you two things. So one thing I'm going to tell you is something my spiritual teacher has to say about plant medicines. And then the next thing I'm going to tell you is another story about plant medicine. Yeah. So my spiritual teacher, I worked under a spiritual master in LA. I know that's an oxymoron, but there is a legitimate spiritual master in LA. His name's Dr. Joseph Levry. He's of the Rose Kabbalistic lineage. Okay. He devised the Nam system of healing and Nam yoga. In any case, I was training with one of his teachers. After all this happened in Guatemala, I decided to do some training with this woman who certified me in Nam Yoga Foundations. And I learned a lot that the spiritual master had handed down to a lot of his best students who became teachers. And she had a background with plant medicine as well. And I asked her point blank, I said, what does he think about taking plant medicines for spiritual evolution? And she said, that's interesting, because he has commented on that. And he said that you can take them, but there's always a price to pay. And I got this. I really understood this, because his lineage involves mudras, mantras, asanas, and you can be doing these for years, and the effects may take you 3 years to get the evolution that I could have in 3 hours, right? But there's always a price to pay. Do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah, the scale is heavy for it's like boom, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I don't know the right answer. I don't know if it's follow the master or become the master. I followed the path that was right for me. But I'm here to say that I don't believe there are shortcuts. I don't. Mm-hmm. I believe that the plant medicines are here to help us evolve, and when taken responsibly in doses that are conducive to openings of awareness and connection to our core and the strengthening of our connection to spirit and source, it's a positive thing. It gives us memory. I'll speak about a different plant medicine, and this one I was introduced to 5-MeO-DMT while I was in LA, and I was taken through, this is otherwise known as the Sonoran toad medicine. Yeah. And I was taken through this experience by a psychologist. He's a doctor, and he's a very loving brother. He had a very loving presence, and he took me through a ceremony where he introduced, I got introduced to the medicine in a small puff first, and got to just feel it inside of me. And then we went deep. We took a beaker, like almost as big as this, full of smoke, and then, basically took a big straw, punctured foil, and took the whole thing all at once, filling my whole lungs with this dense black smoke. I mean, not black, but very very gray,
milky,
dense.
That milky smoke.
Yeah. And it tasted horrible. So I held it all in, and then he carefully lowers me down to the ground where there was this earthing mat where I just got to relax. What the 5-MeO DMT did for me was it produced, obviously they call DMT the God molecule, and what I'm here to report is that I got the experience of being held in space. I mean, I'm just energy, you're just energy, this computer's just energy, all these molecules and atoms bound together, right, with space in between. So here I am, just suspended in space. Something's got me, and I'm just being breathed. Something's just breathing me. Now, here's a little hermetic axiom that many people might not know. If you read the Kybalion, which is a book of Hermetic philosophy, there's an axiom in there, and it says we are all held firmly in the mind of the all, all being the all, the universe, the one. So I knew this axiom before I had this physical experience, and when I had the experience, it galvanized the axiom. I was like, I'm being held in the mind of the all right now. I don't have to do anything. I have no concepts, i.e. thoughts. I had no thoughts, and anytime I tried to form a thought, they were pulled away from me because all my mind wanted to do was make sense of what I was experiencing. And this was just being consciousness. I was just being breathed, I was supported, and I didn't have to do anything. Now, funny story, and I'll circle back to Guatemala. A lot of people were experimenting with the toad medicine down there. And I talked to this guy. I'll never forget this conversation. I don't know why. I went up to him after he had experimented. And I was like, "How was it for you, brother?" And he's like, "Oh man, first time, blew me away. Second time, I went so deep." And he described something to the effect of what I described. And he's like, "Man, I don't know where to go from here." And I got a little cheeky, and I said, "I can tell you where to go from here. Try to do that without the medicine." And this is the core premise that I want to offer today to anyone listening and to anyone on the spiritual path. My challenge to myself, I'm not just like challenging you as some test of masculine durability. My challenge to us as spiritual beings is, can we do that by ourselves? Can we have enough resolve, enough persistence, enough perseverance, enough courage to go into the core of who we are and hang out there and just rest in that space? That takes courage, man. And
it's hard,
that takes courage. All the emotional stuff's going to come up. You don't have to go looking for your beliefs. They'll come up, believe me.
Like life, life and your belief systems will school the shit out of you. Just hang out in that space for a while. Be courageous enough to hang out in the core of your being and not doing anything and not trying to get anywhere. Just really, the axiom, the Hermetic axiom from Hermes himself is know thyself. It's printed in over every temple and in every language. Know thyself. So we are going into the inner temple, and we are just discovering what we're really made of. And when we get I'll speak in first person because I'm having this experience now. My spirituality is going in the direction of, I want to know myself as energy, and I want to know what that energy feels like. And then I want to let that energy flow through me in such a natural way that I can't help but be creative. I can't help but be loving because I know myself as loving. I don't have to try to be loving. I'm just loving. I know myself as loving. So what manifests out of me is love. It's a good place to be, man.
Khalil Gibran said, "Your work is love made manifest."
I like that. I like I think what resonates for me in this process, just as you're talking about, just everything, like this process of just everything that's transpired and that's moving. It's really interesting to hear you say also that, the cheeky comment though, can we do this without, the indulgence of medicines or the use of medicines in some way? And, I'm amazed at how many people that I've talked to who have been through medicine ceremonies, whether that's ayahuasca, 5-MeO, DMT, psilocybin, and there are definitely a very large number of people that I have connected with who have said, I've sat with some medicines, and where sometimes it's one ceremony, sometimes it's 10, or maybe it's some years, but then there's a lot of people who get to this place where like, I don't want any more. Like I've whatever transpired there, I just need to live my life, and I just need to, like, they've been shown things that they can't even put into words that made sense in that space of the ceremony. But when they come back, it's a pretty simple maxim, which is, I just need to live my life. Everything is unfolding right here as it should. And the current of life is teaching me everything that I need to know.
Yes.
And maybe what they've learned and what they've kind of gotten to is that they listen better. That they're like, okay, that was blasted through the fiber of every piece of my being, and I don't get it mentally, but I heard you. I heard it. And then they get to this place where they drop out. They're just like, I'm going to tap out for maybe ever. Maybe I'm just going to live my life, and that's, and I always kind of wonder about that process. My dialogue with psilocybin has been like that in that year. I think I sat with it during all of 2018. I think I sat 10 times maybe, so it was almost every month there was some, or give or take, I might have had 2 months and then a random where I jumped in 2 sessions together. But it was at the end of that year, people, friends of mine were like, do you want to take a journey to, like, cause I need to process some stuff. And I'm like, no, I just don't know. I'm like, I'm pretty full. I don't know I'm not saying I'll never touch psilocybin again, but I thought, boy, I got plenty to just process and live. And that's going to be my medicine for a long time. Is just process and live, like that's enough.
Here's the thing, Gray. You just said the key word. You are the medicine.
Yeah.
You are the medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've taken the medicine and it's got inside you, you've opened up something that it's interesting. I was listening to your podcast, so I know your middle name's Christ.
Yeah.
So there's a really good book called The Jeshua Channelings, and it channels the Christ consciousness. And in it, he talks about the energy of the solution. So he says, try to be, don't go out there trying to preach the truth. And I heard this in your podcast with Iska, who I knew as Iska Vaya, but in any case, she changed her. She went back to her original name.
Yeah.
So what Iska said is relating to that. What were we? I just lost my train of thought.
Oh no, totally. We were talking about people taking the medicines and then being like, I'm out. Like, and I was saying I had taken psilocybin, and you were saying I am the medicine. That after we've taken these medicines, then you become the medicine, essentially. Like, that was the thread you were on, sort of.
Yes, I don't know how it related to Iska. Anyway, we'll get back to that. But you are the medicine. It was about presence. I mean, basically, just look, she was talking about presence. Now we're talking about presence. Yeah. The point is that the energy of the solution is just about presence. It's just holding the presence, holding the solution. You don't even have to say that much. It's just your presence in front of a person that can have the transformative effect. I've realized as part of my undoing or unraveling as a spiritual coach was the fact that I thought concepts were changing people. And, Abraham Hicks talks about this, like words don't heal. Words aren't what's healing people. It's the energy of the solution. So, I'm starting to write more poetry and things like that. So, would a writer be saying that words don't heal? Would that, that doesn't seem to match. But it's not that the words themselves are doing the healing. It's that the vibration put into those words are going inside. I'm communicating when I'm writing my poetry now. I'm communicating from the energy of the solution, from my being.
Yeah.
I may not be, I may not be in full Christ consciousness at this point, you know, but I'm communicating from what I understand to be my being consciousness, my inner master. And I believe we all have access to that if we allow it.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly, I've been told twice now to stop doing medicine by people who were tapped into higher realms. I went down to a retreat in Costa Rica. This was almost 2 years ago now. I was in LA going through a rough patch, doing a lot of ups and downs and figuring out. And I was working with small amounts of psilocybin at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I get called down to Costa Rica to do this retreat. It happened very synchronistically. It all seemed to align. And it was a very powerful medicine called Iboga. And
yeah, I've heard.
Yeah,
that's
you
no
go
joke.
into like a 2-day coma. So,
Isn't that? I mean, from what I've understood, maybe I've understood this incorrectly, but I thought that was sort of reserved for people who had like full blown opioid addictions, and it was sort of reserved for that class of people. Like if you,
it is
okay,
It is.
So people, people still partake though. Just as okay.
Iboga has been converted into ibogaine, which is kind of a synthetic substitute. Yeah, so ibogaine is being used in heroin treatment and things like that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But Iboga root is natural. They call it the holy wood because it's a wood. It's a root from a tree.
Very intense, though, from what I've heard. Yeah.
It is very intense. Mm-hmm. And I tasted the Nima, which is the name for the shaman in this tradition. It's from Gabon, West Africa. So the name of the shaman is Nima, and the Nima gave me a small taste because at that point in the ceremony, he decided, he had pulled me aside and he had said, "You are not taking the medicine, a full dose." Mm-hmm. And I asked him why, and he said, "The spirits have spoken to me, and I take this very seriously. They've told me that if I give this medicine to you, you'll die." And I was like, whoa.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. All right, I won't be taking the medicine today. I'd flown all the way to Costa Rica at a pretty high expense simply to have this experience, and I did not. But to fast forward and then to cut this long story short, I ended up, the last thing I did before I left San Marcos, Guatemala, was I did a 4-day intensive medicine ceremony with psilocybin. This was all supervised under this man who has a lot of experience, and it was done in a very methodical way. He also receives the dosage for each person. He intuitively tunes in. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the experience, a couple days after the 4-day retreat, he sent me an urgent message and said, "I need to have a Skype call with you." And I said, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" We get on the call and he says, "All right, this doesn't happen a lot." I said, "Just lay it on me." He goes, "Look, I was up all night." And he goes, "Your higher self came to me in my dreams and wouldn't leave me alone." And I was like, "What was I saying?" And he said, "Your higher self was telling me to tell you to stop doing these psilocybin. Stop. Just give yourself a break."
Yeah.
And what I realized was I went into a major I went into the second half of my depressive episodes. I had those in my early 30s. It was I've had a history of depression, and mental health for me has been one of my biggest issues. It's been one of my biggest hindrances to productivity, carrying out my dreams, having a happy relationship. It's been everything. It's been one of my biggest hindrances.
Yeah.
So I got back from Guatemala, and all of a sudden I had this mental illness started coming up again, and I felt completely distraught. I didn't know up from down. I didn't feel capable of doing anything. Yeah. And for about a month after I got back to the States, I was just nursing myself back to health.
Yeah.
And after several months of being back and nursing myself back to health, I realized that I've gone through some major transformational experiences. My neurology has changed. I've blown it open, and now things are kind of, you've heard of reconnective healing?
Yes. Yep.
My neurons are like reconnecting now, and they're fusing back together in a new way. And I need to give myself time to heal, because if I just keep doing medicines, it's boom, boom, it's opening up new neural pathways. It's like I got this image one time of like split hair. And that's what nerve endings might look like if we just keep blowing them open. You'll have all these split hairs.
Well, it's a great thread, man. You're not the first person to sort of touch on this idea. Other people in, my circles and people that I listen to and friends of mine that are in this stuff, they talk about this very thing where they're saying, we've got, I feel like, with the American culture, psychedelics are making a resurgence. They're coming back into the culture and people are exploring and there's all these openings. But they said, this same idea, right? It's like a muscle fiber being torn open as we work it and exercise it. But this is of the, energetic body and maybe of the spirit where we're like, tearing open these things and creating these new expansions. But exactly, there also needs to be a very real time to integrate, repair, replenish, restore, reorient, get back into that place where you're like, okay, whether you know it or not, whether you fully get it or not, you've been opened and something has been stretched and expanded. Therefore now integrate and live your life, give it some time to just let things unfold. And it goes back to that. Well, just life is sort of doing it for us, and I think maybe if nothing else, these psychedelics seem to kind of bring us back into that mechanism of the game is rigged in a very positive way for us. It's like, if you just walk through this 3D reality and just live life and let the experiences, come through and let life school you, that's at least for me, that seems like the biggest dose of the medicine that's come from this stuff, is that life is rigged to help you and help you go through and evolve. But you do have to engage. You got to be here. You have to be present. The threads coming back to what you said, that the authenticity piece, being authentically right there. It's just that's
not even authenticity. Let's go deeper than that, because here's, when you were saying all those words that started with RE, the words that popped up for me were two more words with RE: remember and relationship.
Yeah.
Because after all's said and done, and you've taken those medicines and you've blown your mind open and you've blown your heart open, now you're open. What are you going to do with it?
Yep.
So here's what happens. We're blown open, but what got blown open? Our perceptions, the illusion, the thought structures, the belief systems. Now we have to remember who and what we really are. This requires relationship. And I feel myself going into teacher mode, so I want to just pull back and just relate this to my experience. Personally, relationship for me has been my healing. It's remembering who I am. It's remembering that there is this beautiful relationship I can have with my own being, starting with my own heart, just loving my own heart each day. And then creating this relationship with my being so that I'm actually tuning in. We talked about needs earlier, and just asking myself, what am I needing? And asking that being within, what are you needing? What needs to be, there's right. When I connect to that, it naturally, and I honor that. If I connect to that part of me and I honor that part of me, sooner or later, that part of me is going to express itself through me as me. And then my life right now is all about allowing that expression to come forth. My mentor, one of my early mentors, called this downloading your substance. So in my experience and all my transformation, I've been a transformation addict over the years, and I'm finally realizing that I'm worn down. I'm tired of all the personal development. Yeah. All I have to do now is just remember. The work's done. I do need to remember, and I do need to bring in, and develop these true values, these true character traits that I really want to embody, because this is my being is this, it's this substance. It is a substance. My being is this beautiful substance. It's this essence. But I have to decide now, how am I showing up in the world? And that's manifested through my character. And character is what I'm learning now. And, admittedly, this did come from a personal development course, but, character is my structure. It is how the divine is expressing itself through this structure called character. And this character, now I'm infusing it with these high vibrational values of integrity and commitment and consistency and authenticity, truth, wisdom, kindness, compassion. You know, this is my nature. I want to know my nature. I want to remember the truth. Yeah. And then I want to, you know, forget about, you know, I think in the past, we were talking about this before we got on the call, you know, there's so many people are out there just promoting themselves, you know, jump into my coaching program, jump into this, jump into that, buy my services. Yes, we all need to make a living, and yes, we all are a representation of our work. But I'd rather someone come to me because they resonate with me as a being, they feel me, and they feel safe with me. And I know you're listening to your podcast with this guy, I know that she identified you as that same kind of person that people feel safe with.
Yeah.
And I think this is important because that's if you're truly in your core, in your heart, and you're I feel safe with you, then I can open up to you. And I am.
Yeah.
So you're holding your powerful space for me to open. And then I'm in turn holding my powerful space for someone else to open. And if we all do that, you know, as Marianne Williams said, your presence automatically liberates others.
Yeah. That's a great quote, right? That whole, it's not your, it's your light that scares you, not your darkness. That whole, it's got that beautiful quote. I love that quote. And I agree with you, man. I mean, I vibe with what you're saying 100%, because I think all these threads that you're hitting on have tremendous merit. And that notion of character, you know, like and developing the character, and then just that art imitates life. And, you know, life imitates art, and it goes both ways. And, you know, not that I agree with everything that he's saying now, but, you know, if you listen to Jim Carrey, I watched him for years growing up. He was like one of the funniest. He was one of my comedic icons growing up. And when you listen to him in interviews now, and he talks about how he looks at his life and the characters that he played, you know, Jim Carrey, the funny guy. And he says, you know, up until 10 years ago, like that was a character that I was playing. You know, it was a character to fulfill a need in my life at the time. And he's like, but the character, he's like, it's kind of just all of a facade. It's just a character that I was playing. You know, like his true personality during those years, he's like, was a character. And it's just really interesting to hear him kind of talk about it now. And he gets a little heady and stuff, but it's just interesting that I think like a lot of us are living, we are living characters, you know, and we're developing character, you know, and it's like there's this, it's just interesting how it's like, you know, how an actor can take on a role and embody it fully, and they go through so much when they take on the character's energy. It's pretty crazy.
I've got an interesting story about this. This is actually very, very synchronistic that you're mentioning this, because I had this. So here's an interesting story. When I was down in Nicaragua, I was at a nomad. It was called the Nomad Lifehouse, and it was a place for digital nomads to kind of bunk and, you know, do their work. And we had this swim up bar and like beautiful infinity pool. It was amazing. So here I am at this nomad place, and we have movie night, and they played Andy and Jim and Andy, the movie that features. It's a kind of a documentary about Jim Carrey
doing
playing
Andy Kaufman.
Yes, thank you. I almost said Andy Warhol. Kaufman.
Yeah.
So it was a really, like,
I've seen it. Yeah.
If I'm being honest, it's a shitty movie, but I didn't care for a lot of it. It was kind of this rambling, you know, movie that I didn't much resonate with. But I remember one thing that really stood out, and Jim said in this film, he said, I was a struggling stand-up comic in Canada or whatever, and I was doing all these gigs night after night, making a living, and I could have gone on like that. Yeah. But, you know, I knew there was something bigger for me. So I went home, and I started asking, you know, bigger questions. And he said the biggest question that I could think to ask was, what are they needing?
Yeah.
He really, so this is interesting because it connects to, I had brought up needs earlier, and I've been telling this story about Jim Carrey because this has inspired me. What Jim Carrey said was he asked, what are they needing? And then he went to sleep one night, and he woke up in the middle of his sleep, and he had the answer. And the answer was, people want to forget about their problems. People don't want to be in their day-to-day worries. So he embodied he manifested 3 roles in his career that would catalyze his success and give him a firm foot in Hollywood elite.
Yeah.
And those 3 roles were Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, and The Mask. And those 3 roles allowed him to play a character that completely let people just forget about their worries. These were carefree, sometimes fictional characters, but they were completely off their rockers. And they
totally, man.
But it gave people permission to just let go of their worries and remember what it's like to just be casual and effortless and nonchalant.
Yeah.
So that one question made Jim Carrey a multimillionaire and solidified him in the Hollywood elite. But I like to tell that story often because I think that question is very, very powerful because it connects us back to how we can serve in a bigger way, and that's through needs. That's by actually asking and waiting and receiving the answer of what people are needing. And then we show up and we answer that through our own expression, through our creative expression. Jim did it in the form of a role, and maybe he evolved out of that. And now if he asked, what are they needing? He's doing other things now. He's painting and he's developed. Yeah. He's doing amazing artistic things. Yep. His expression is just off the hook. I mean, he is literally embodying the artist within. And if I am going to plug myself at all during this, all I would say about my work is that my intention is to help people release their artist soul. Yeah. And this was actually an intention that came to me while I was working with a graphic artist and painter down in Nicaragua on that island that we affectionately called Circus Island. Mm-hmm. And I sat with this woman who does these beautiful murals and 3D art and astral figures and all these different light beings and entities. And the intention that I got while working with her was help her release her artist soul. And I thought, well, that's weird because she's already an artist. Yeah. But I don't want to reveal too much about our session, but basically she had some things inside that were still wanting to express. And so we did some deep inner work, and then it started coming out that she had much more to contribute to the world. And then it manifested in so many different ways, and she's doing great, by the way. And she's doing a whole slew of things that have expanded her. Yeah. I don't take credit for it all. Obviously, she was a talented person before, and she continues to be. But it's just those little shifts. It's helping people really get inside of their being and really getting to know who that artistic, because each of us is an artist, I believe. Yeah. Figuring out what that true nature is all about, and then asking, how does this want to express, first of all? And then what are people needing that I can be the solution for? I can provide that solution, and I truly believe each of us can. Yeah.
I love it, man. I love it. And I love the work that you're doing. The threads that you've shared with me, especially in recent months and the discourse that we've had, all of them were hitting. I was like, yes. Mm. They spoke to me, and I know that the work you're doing is speaking to others. I don't see how it couldn't, especially given the breadth of things that you've done. And you've dabbled in a lot of different things, that have yielded some pretty amazing fruits, and you're sharing them, which I think is one of the best things we can do. Well, Tristan, parting words for the audience, we've touched on, authenticity, character, needs, psychedelic medicines, personal evolution and growth. With all of these things, are there any parting words something you'd want to, say to the audience to sort of keep in mind as we all go through, life, and we're all evolving and learning and kind of, navigating our process as best we can?
Yeah, definitely. I would have loved for this to be my own wisdom, but I'm going to borrow wisdom that has really resounded for me lately in my life, and that is from Yogi Bhajan, the founder of Kundalini Yoga. And this isn't a direct quote, but I'll paraphrase. And he just said, know your truth and know how close you are at any given moment to your truth. Mm-hmm.
Proximity to your truth, right?
Yeah. Know where you are. Yeah. Know your truth and then know how close you are at all times to that truth. And I think I've sat with that and I've just been like, man, wow.
Yeah. Wow. Something to sit with.
He also said, be unshakable. Can you be unshakable? I love that. Yeah. Because life, my parting words are these: life have shaken me to my fucking core. They have humbled me, and if I didn't know how resilient I was, I would have been broken. It would have not just humbled me, it would have broken me. Yeah. But I'm still here, and I'm still going forward, and I'm more creative than ever. I'm stronger than ever, and I want to share that with anybody who's listening, that can you be unshakable? Because life will shake you up, but at our core, we are so strong, man. We are so strong.
Yeah, so, rooted like a mountain,
Oof. So this is the real spiritual alchemy. It's really getting to that golden center and just resting in that place, being in that truth, knowing how close you are at all times to it, and then acting from that truth, showing up as that truth, and giving us your gift. I truly believe each one of us has a gift to share, and we truly, this isn't cliche, although you hear it a lot, we need your gift. We need you to give your gift.
I agree. I mean, my mom has said that to me for years, from the time I was a little boy. She's like, great, everyone's got God-given gifts and talents. Like, we've all been gifted something, and some of them in society are like revered more than others. She said, but everyone's given something. And she's like, I don't subscribe to sin per se. She's like, for lack of a better term, she's like, I think it's a sin to not use it. Like, if you got the gift, you should disseminate that and share it and move it. My face reading teacher, Lillian Bridges, talks about this too, from the Chinese medicine thing. And I've talked about it in other podcasts, but she says that very thing. She's like, the Jing, the constitutional essence that carries the blueprints of our gifts that are inside of us. She's like, the overuse of your Jing, of your gifts, will make you sick. She says, but so will underuse. Like, not using and disseminating your gifts will make you very sick. Like, it can threaten your life force as you get older. Yes. So some cool points to consider there.
If you bring forth what is within you will save you. But if you do not bring forth what is within you will destroy you.
Yep.
That's from the Gospel of Thomas, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Well, I would agree. That's on point for sure, man. Well, Tristan, thank you, man, for your time and the vulnerability, sharing everything that you did. I mean, you have quite a range of stuff that was presented, and I really appreciate it. If people want to follow you on social media or anything, where are the places that they can find you?
Easiest thing to do is go to www.tristanmontoya.com. TristanMontoya.com. Otherwise, Instagram, you can find me through there, and that'll connect you to all my other accounts. Instagram, Art of Allowance.
Art of Allowance.
The Art of Allowance. No the, although I put the just as a Art
okay. Art of Allowance.
Art of Allowance. Yeah, and that's basically the course I'm creating is called Art of Allowance, and it's basically a course that's just helping people find their inner artist and release their artist soul, finding that inner expression that wants to come forth into the world. So that's what I'm up to. I would love for anyone who's interested or resonated with this to find me, chat with me, reach out, send a message, say hi, something like that. Great. I appreciate you. This was an amazing conversation, and thank you for creating the space for all this to unfold.
Oh, you bet, man. Yeah, I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying getting to have conversations with people like yourself who are doing good things, who are passionate about it, and who are fighting the good fight to up-level the people around them. So I think it's a worthy endeavor, man, and I appreciate it. So, cool. Thank you, man. Until next time, we'll probably have you on again at some point for some other cool topic. But yeah, I appreciate your time.
All right. Peace. Take care.
Take care.